the I Teach Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 106, Game of Thrones miniseries, episode 6. What can Maesters teach us about DNSSEC? So, for this episode, special guest, Jerome Altoff, sitting here, not next to me, but 55 miles away, coming in from somewhere else, the deep, dark layer of not where I am. So, we'll say that.
A dark layer.
That's right.
To the rest of the planet.
Well, I don't know. It's very early in the morning, so screw you. Anyway, it's Jerome. You wanna get all your prereqs out of the way? I know you have a couple of things you have to say before we can continue.
As always, I'm so thankful to be on your show. I love sitting and chatting with you. The opinions and basically anything I say here is my own personal opinion, does not represent my employer or any other entities. So yeah, it's just me talking about what I have read or heard or done in my time, just like what you're doing.
Yep. And as always, all opinions should be considered satire and in no way are indicative of actual fact. So that being said, let's move on. So Maesters, I know you've watched Game of Thrones and probably read the books just like I have because you're a giant nerd like I am.
Yeah. More than 3 seasons, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, the budgets for the dragons, they just couldn't find it.
Sure.
But in Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire and Ice, whatever it is, he named it dumb. Anyways, there's a collection of folk. They're called the Order of Maesters, and these guys are the old guys that advise the leaders of Westeros. They are typically supposed to be learned men. The way they go about getting learned and taught is that they go to the Citadel, which is an old town. This specific place, they learn different types of masteries, and the Maesters were a chain. This chain identifies what sort of masteries they have in place. So, they have like black iron for ravenry and gold for money and accounting, pale steel for smithing, and Valyrian steel for the higher mysteries, which is magic, which, they show off on their chains, and the more chains you have, the more experienced you are as a maester. Seems like it'd be really easy to forge that personally. But these guys are essentially the folk that are really advising everybody and are helping try to keep peace within Westeros. Now, the origins of the Maesters were basically supposed to be just advising and keeping all of the histories and what they had learned in place, so that way the kingdom of men did not lose technology or learnings as winters came on and people died and shit like that. So they were supposed to be a direct defense for men against the White Walkers, which obviously didn't fucking happen because everybody just kind of ignored them and did what they wanted and played the Game of Thrones and ended up killing everybody. Most notably, one of the things that is kind of obvious, at least in the show, is that the Targaryens really didn't have good maesters at all. Like, most of them didn't even have a maester. When they did, they basically fed them poison in the ear. And there are several small references to this in the show, and I'm not going to nerd out on this. I'm going to probably stop nerding out as much as I can. But anyway, in this, yeah, right. Everybody's going to be fine. Everybody's going to be fine. Nobody ate each other. Nobody's. Missandra definitely didn't die. She didn't die. Anyway,
good rating for your podcast.
Maybe, I don't know. No, obviously not. There are dozens of you that listen to this. So anyway, so how that relates to DNSSEC, one of the things that we understand, at least as far as what Maesters were able to do, is they were able to perform various functions in guiding. Again, they were trying to guide and advise the leaders of Westeros to do certain things. And one of the things they were specifically trying to do was basically make sure that Maesters were talking to each other and that leaders were talking to the proper people and authenticate certain messages and things like that, especially with Ravenry. Like, hey, who do you know who you're talking to? Do you know whose Raven you received? And for those of you who don't know, Ravens were basically the messenger pigeons in this world. So you attach a message to a Raven and it's fly off and go wherever it was supposed to be, because Ravens are smart birds. God damn it. Love corvids. Anyway, so also this episode is going to be a little different than the previous ones, because DNSSEC is actually one of those things that I don't have a lot of practical experience with, because I'm a normal IT guy and don't dive into the super detailed granular aspects of a lot of the protocols that we use, because we don't have fucking time. We've got to do a lot of work just keeping shit running. So
The acronym.
yeah, exactly.
And at work.
Yeah. So for the vast majority of the actual, like, hey, this is the technical aspect of DNSSEC. I'm actually going to rely on you, Jerome, to tell me what's going to go on, and I'm going to make fun of you as you say stuff, because that's the mode of this podcast.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have really good hair. Anyway, no. I have to put a disclaimer out. So this is definitely me working with Matthew, and it's one of my favorite things to do is to hang out and chat and make fun technology with him. But I also have assignment due. So if this comes off a little bit like a lecture, all 12 of you, it is going to a little bit be like that. He's helping me by letting me take over the podcast for a few minutes, just to show a certain professor at a certain school that, yes, I actually understand what DNSSEC is. I had to write a paper. So thanks.
He ruined the mystique. That's supposed to be just. We're supposed to be just. Yeah. Woo.
We got really intellectual for one episode.
That's it.
They're not intellectual, really detailed. We're always intellectual. Anyway, so Matthew was doing this special on with Game of Thrones. So like you said, the Maesters, they can like link all of Westeros together, and they forged like the little chains that were around their belts, very chic, and they all get trained back in the Citadel and come from there and then spread across the land and keep everything kind of connected in the background. Well, like you said, which is very, very similar to DNS, which is something I want to go into for about a minute of just foundational information on. DNS is the domain name service. It's the phone book of the internet. It changes the words to numbers and numbers to words. So machines can do their fun, happy thing in Numberland, and humans can do their fun, happy thing in Wordland. It was defined in 1987 by an RFC, a set of RFCs, 1034 and 1035. RFC stands for Request for Comment. So if you've been in IT land at all, you have heard this word or acronym bumble around somewhere, and you're like, what the hell is it? If you've been here for a while, you probably have, unfortunately, read one or two of them. There are a lot of them, and they are foundational. Like, if you have a question about how something works, you should go look at the RFC. At least have it around. Control F that shit. Don't read the whole thing. They can be the one about PERT is great.
Well, for the most of us, RFC just kind of becomes static. It's just like one of those. It's noise in the background, because you see it and you're like, oh my God. Just, okay, whatever. Yeah, well, I don't know what that means. We're moving on.
But like, we got into a heated discussion one day, and people were like, well, my opinion. And the professor was like quietly chatting, typing, and then threw the RFC up on the screen. He's like, and your opinions don't matter. Look at the RFC. It's like, there. That actually is a great point. And it is a good point. These are the foundational documents that make all these protocols work, all these technologies work. There's a lot of them that don't work anymore because they're old. There is one about pigeons. I'm not kidding. It's hilarious. Have you heard about that one?
The only one that I know is a practical example of data transfer rates, where somebody attached a 4 gig SD card to a pigeon and flew it to another city to basically, they were they had bet that this one telecom's internet or network was so shitty that a pigeon could defeat it.
See,
and it did handily.
Nerds could be funny too. Anyway, again, this was defined by two RFCs in 1987. Key thing about 1987 and early 90s, everyone thought the world was beautiful and peaceful and like just bliss land, and there was no threats anywhere, and nobody disagreed about anything. Everyone was like holding hands and singing. So
yeah, we did Hands Across America, didn't we? That was successful, right?
Hands across the world, because like the Soviets and Americans loved each other. Basically what I'm getting at is, at the time, the people who made these technologies didn't put any security foundations into anything. And that is a recurring theme across most technology that we're dealing with now, because what we do now stands as far as what we did then. And this will come up here in a second. And then the last thing, for my 1 minute, I'm still under a minute, I swear, on background of DNS, is the DNS root is a collection of 13 quote servers, 10 of which are run by United States organizations and 3 run by non-US organizations. The reason I say quote servers is because each one of those 13 is actually a logical single entity, while physically being dispersed over many machines. They never go down. They're not all in one room. There's not 13 rooms around the world. There's clusters, and logically, they're one thing. Okay, so that's the very brief background on DNS. That was just Maesters getting set up and being sent out in the wide world of Westeros. And everyone's like, who the fuck are you? Why do we care? Who's this? Like in Braveheart, who is this person who speaks as if I want their advice?
Old dude, man. You're just an old dude who wants to eat my food. And
you, as distinct from any other old dude who's just mumbling at stuff at me and holding birds. Like, what the hell?
Old man.
Yeah. Copy. So the fast forward, I mean, it worked. It still worked. Even with their lumpy, like, lack of belts, they were still out there advising kings and making Westeros work, and nobody had any problems with it. And that worked from 1987 to 2005. I should say that worked. People knew it was a problem for a long time. They just didn't have a solution until 2005. And in 2005, 3 more RFCs got dropped. 4,033, 34, and 35. It's basically defining the problem, define the tech, and then implement the tech, were the 3. And there's been a couple of RFCs updating the baseline since, but minor updates, so I'm not too worried about those ones. But that defines something called DNS security, or DNSSEC. Very elaborate, very cool name.
Oh man, they were so original.
They were. But like, so you get this DNS entry, and you trusted it. You just had to trust it. But how did you know it was actually legitimate? How did you know it hadn't been either messed up en route, which is possible and not malicious, or maliciously tweaked? If you were going to somebody else's page, if whatever, you had no way to really trust your local DNS or the top level domain or the root, that you had no way to trust that the record you were receiving was from one of those authoritative sources or the authority for that domain. And that's
how do I know that this piece of paper came from you?
Yeah. And so that's kind of a teaser into just how it technically works. So those roots out there then talk to top level domains. And these are the .coms, .governments, .countries, and it's usually a 2 to 3 letter code for the countries. Which, fun little side story, the Soviet Union still has a top level domain and is still in use by the Russian Federation. Didn't know that. I thought that was interesting.
Like, it's not .ru?
No, that's Russian Federation.
Oh, what's the USSR?
Shit, you have a fun aside and then you don't have your note in front of you.
Well, see, .ussr would be just perfect, but that's probably not it. It's probably .cccp or something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, but I ask the hard questions, and then now I make you run around. That's what I do.
I'm the jerk who said it and then didn't have it in front of me.
Trying to co-op my podcast, and I'm gonna make you work for it.
No, Soviet Union. Yeah. So .su is still in use by the Russian Federation for something.
.su?
Yeah. They got it 15 months before they collapsed.
It just for me that's kind of funny just because it's the exact it's the opposite of .us and it's just like we're gonna be the exact opposite of you. It's like, but bro, we use duck. That's
What .gov? Because there's only one government in the world. So we'll come back to that. That's part of some people's issues with DNS in general, or the internet in general. But so those root, it's a very hierarchical structure. Like root is authoritative for everything. They're the ones who hand out all the IP blocks, all the names. They're the guys who are like, nah, dude, you're on the other side of the red velvet rope. You're not in the internet. Then they pass that down because they're lazy. They pass it down to the top level domain guys who are,
man, I really wish there was a red bro.
it's so,
Where
it's so fun to touch when you can't go across it because I across it. But anyway, and they hand off the work onto these top level domains, the .coms, .govs, whoever's, and they're supposed to know all their peeps basically, right? So the root domain is like, I am the top dog, but I don't want to do any work, so I'm going to punch you immediately to a .com, and then .com has to track all those places that have blah 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 .com, and then I'll shoot you down to the top level. Will shoot you down to whatever the authoritative domain name service is at your domain. And then that should respond back to the person or back to their local. And then that actually responds to their person. Very messy. I got it. Hard to describe over words too. But if you notice, there was like 3 major steps just inside the domain name service land. And then there's still that last mile from your local to you. So anywhere in there, somebody could have put something malicious or not. And then that last mile was malicious and said they were from the root or top level or authoritative. And you're like, but how do I know? So,
but Jerome, man in the middle attacks are not a thing. No, they're not a thing.
I beg to differ. Do you have a NAT gateway? Because that's just you man in middling yourself. And that's an interesting topic for another day. But so, and just like the Maesters are like, shit, everyone else doesn't know, it's just us. And we are the ones who need to eat the food, have the birds. They're like, how do we prove it? How do we show that we are real Maesters who went back to the Citadel and were trained? So they came up with the idea of a hashed key using the whole idea of the public key structure. You know, like I have a private key and a public key, and you have a private key and a public key, and we can trust each other because I encrypt a little hash and send it to you, and you can compare it to my public key, and then you know that this actually came from me. Like, now without going too deep into public private key, which you could probably do in an audio only podcast, but probably you need a picture. I need a picture. So I'm not going to go too much deeper than that. But like, you need I do, and a whole bunch of math to prove that it came from me to you. And then you can validate it independently of me to know that it's actually legit. Yeah. So people are like, hey, why don't we freaking take that idea and smush it into DNS? Because DNS isn't already super easy to break. And so they did. And what it is every tier down gets a key from the tier above it. So like the Maesters actually in the Citadel are the ones handing out the links. Like, no shit, dude, you really did figure out how to tie your own shoes. Here's your first link. And their second,
like, are you telling me they're like badges for Boy Scouts?
Yeah, and this one's for surfing and needlework. And like, but that chain, even though the Maester is no longer in the Citadel and they're in, not Scandinavia up there in the north, yeah, if they're in that other kingdom, you see the chain on them, but you can tell that chain logically links back to the Citadel, and that visually confirms that this person is a Maester, is trained, actually knows what they're talking about, and didn't just kill the old dude on the road and take their chain. Wait a second. So, cool. You have these chains. How do they actually freaking work? So you have a setup of the zone signing keys and key signing keys at each tier. And those are the main things to make it work. So you have a key signing key, which is a huge key. like the biggest key. And the great key to rule them all for your bubble. So like if you look at the hierarchy, like there's the authoritative DNS server's bubble at the bottom of the hierarchy, then the top level domain bubble above it, and then the root server. All three of those have their own zone key signing key. Freaking huge. And the idea is that because it's so huge, it'll take a large amount of compute power to break. And so you can keep that key for longer, and you don't have to rotate it as often, because when you rotate a key, all the keys below it have to be changed. So that's the key signing key. With the key signing key, each one of those sub guys can cut zone signing keys quickly and cheaply, and they're smaller keys. And they'll cut those off. So like, I am the authoritative domain name service for Westeros, and I say, this is my key, and then, oh, well, here's a little link that I'm going to put on this maester and put him into this castle because he's good, and I can rotate him anytime I need to because I'm still the authoritative. I guess to bring the analogy down, I am the Maesters Guild, and then each one of those links is one of the people, and I can rotate those people as I need to pretty easily. But you can still trust the Maesters overall. But that logic holds at each tier, because each tier has to say, I'm trustworthy, and this is why, because I have this key, and in this key is my trust from the key and the tier above me, the bubble above me, the hierarchy above me. So it's forward proving, backward validating, I think is it, or forward validating, backward proving. I just came up with these choices of words, so I'm not sure which way is right, but basically you can trust me and this is why, and then shows you the backward. And you can follow them back up the stack, back up to the root.
It's a cert chain that is validated, that you can identify all the way back to the source. So there's never a point where a generative key in this chain is made by itself. It's always made from an iterative portion of the key before it. Right?
Almost right. There is one exception category, and we'll get to that. But yeah, that chain is what makes it quote unquote secure and valid all the way through and for everybody, and you can trust this. It came from on high.
Now,
go ahead.
One thing to identify here specifically that I want to make sure that everybody understands, because I'm pedantic and I'm a shitty person that wants to ruin a lot of stuff, but namely the flow. The certificate, this is different than certificates, because the difference between keys and certificates is that keys cannot be revoked. Only certificates can. But when rotating keys, that basically revokes the key in and of itself. But there's not like a key revocation list like there is with a certificate. So when you're checking the certificate chain or the key chain, there's no way to identify that the key has been revoked other than the time expiry on the key. Is that correct?
Yes. And thank you for the clarity. Yeah, once the key is bad, once the key signing key is bad, all sub keys are bad. And they do a rotation on a quarter system. So 4 times a year, these keys go out. And they stagger them. So it's not all the keys go out first quarter and all the keys go out second. So I think I just contradicted myself. They do re-sign the top level keys, and we're going to get into the DNS signing ceremony here in a second, every quarter, but they don't do all 13 of them at once. So it is staggered, and they do time out, and it kills all sub keys, like you're saying. And that is a distinction that people should be tracking, that why it's two different things. And why it's like, well, isn't this SSL? No, it's not SSL. That's a different layer. Okay. So you chase this, and it sounds great. You don't trust anybody except the person behind you, that trusts the person behind them, that trusts the person behind that. and then you follow all those Maesters back eventually to the Citadel. But then you're like, why the hell do I trust the Citadel in the first place? And that's when the Citadel slaps you and says, just trust us. No. Just like we've complained on other episodes, zero trust is bullshit. You have to play somewhere, sometime. And we do eventually trust what is the signing ceremony. And that is a pretty elaborate thing. Like the first time I saw it when I was researching, I giggled because I was like, okay, sure. And then I read about it. I was like, oh shit, this is actually a thing. It's a set where to actually change those keys out, a group of people will come together at the physical building, and they have it set up where no one person is able to do it. They have it set up where it would take like 3 out of 5 of the human beings in the room to be acting maliciously to break the key, because none of them have all of it, and they broke it, basically the math and the hardware keys to generate a new key signing key for root into so many small pieces that they accounted for somebody being malicious in the room. They just figured if it's more than 3 people malicious in the room, then well, fuck. But ultimately, where the trust comes from, and in my mind, that's like the people getting together, forging that first ring to make the first chain. That's what it is, and it's a whole shebang. After reading it, I kind of want to figure out a way to get into one of the signing ceremonies or watch it, because I hope they wear party hats.
Yeah, well, like what comes into my mind when you say that, I don't know if you remember like the old style like giant cuckoo clocks, where they have like the people march out onto the balcony in front of the clock, and then they do like whatever. Like there's one that like they forge a sword and they walk back out. That's what it reminds me of. That's what makes me think of it, which is kind of apt, because it does happen on a times. It does happen at a specific time all the time.
Yeah, and
right. Yeah,
it happens once a quarter, but not at all the sites.
That's a lot. That's a lot of parties, man. That's a lot of parties.
Sorry. Again, I'm almost done my first cup of coffee. It happens at 2 sites, and they flip flop between the 2. I just realized, holy freaking said that wrong a minute ago. It alternates between the East and West Coast of the United States, and every 3 months they do it, and it does change for all of them. So it's the root signing key for the roots, and it happens twice a year. And yeah, or it's in 2 locations, 4 times a year, every 3 months. It's really ridiculous. Cloudflare actually has a really cool write-up on it, and it was pretty entertaining with pictures. So if you ever interested, you could just Google Cloudflare and root signing ceremony. Again, I thought it was fake. I had to look up multiple sources before, like, oh, okay, this isn't just like the Grand Wizard.
It's like their lava lamp wall.
Oh yeah, dude, that's great. I love the lava lamp. Maximum entropy. Anyway, okay, so if this sounds kind of complicated and messy, and it is, it's a hot mess. And that would explain why it came out in 2005, and people are still fumbling around in the dark trying to implement it a little bit. And it's just cumbersome. Everything with DNS is going to be the breaking, easy to mess everything up. And then you add key signing keys and root signing key signing keys and zone signing keys, and the way to chain them. And I can't even say it right now. I have my notes in front of me. Key signing and zone signing, and which one does which exactly. And if you mismatch those, or only partially implement them, or don't cycle them correctly, then you've broken the chain for you and everyone below you.
Yeah, and
it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy to fuck up, and DNS is just easy to just use if you just use normal DNS. And so that there's a reason why normal IT departments don't really use DNSSEC. It's because of how complicated it is to implement, and the fact that DNS by itself is very easy to use.
Yeah, it's fire and forget for sure. And there's all these other tools like certificates that help. I This is the website I'm looking for. These are the droids I want. For instance, like the Netherlands rollover messed up slightly and not wiped out, but crashed 5 million subdomains because the top level domain went down for a little bit. So the Netherlands was out of service because somebody messed up their key. Like country. Yeah. I did just realize as we put it off for a minute. There are basically subdomains of trust where you sign yourself. And that was a exception in the RFC. Basically, like if you do a standalone network, there is no way for you to connect to the root domain. And so there's a portion of the key that's like, hey, I am a stub zone. And or a security island, I think is what the technical term is.
Myself, that's what it sounds like.
Pretty much. But there's a flag on it so that you know that you're interacting with a standalone zone, which I don't know. I don't know how many people have actually dealt with really truly isolated networks that are well built. You know you're in a standalone zone. You you should absolutely know that you're in a not the public internet. It should be pretty obvious. Like yeah, because we're Google and we can do whatever we want. Okay, so that
Well, it could also be AWS and, and the 2/3 of the internet goes down anyway.
well, yeah.
The recent news.
Get to the down page. Thank you, internet. Yeah. And that so DNSSEC is also it's hyper focused on two portions of the security triad, the integrity and the oh dang it. A stands for not authenticity. Yeah, availability. Yeah, so DNS by itself is availability. The DNSSEC adds integrity because you actually know what it's coming from. What DNSSEC doesn't touch is confidentiality. DNS doesn't care. It's very public. It's out there in the void, just trying to get the mamas and the papas to the mamas and the papas. Or in Maesters speak, like when the Stark's castle got taken, Winterheld got taken by, well, like everybody. It was a rotating smoke. Maester kept helping whoever was in charge of the castle because, yeah, just like DNS and DNSSEC, the Maesters focus heavily on just making things work and not who is there asking them to make it work. I think that's all of my points that I want to make in a hopefully fun and informative way. So I think we can move on to where we at now with the NSEC and then make the fun out of it and what might be coming next. So again, it's been out since 05 and it's not going to be implemented, not worldwide. It's like IPv6. It's a good idea. It's less of a good idea than 6. And while 6 is starting to finally take off on implementation, DNSSEC is not. It's not going to. But especially in Asia, for whatever reason, when I looked at the numbers, historically, Asia continues to have problems with it. It could be because there's at least one minor country in Asia that's not a big fan of the US, kind of actively working to be supplanting the US. And that they have this giant wall of fire that DNS doesn't necessarily work through. And it doesn't work around either. It's definitely an interesting thing. So honestly, it could just be the Great Firewall, making it so that DNS is kind of broken anyway. That they, like you said earlier, man in the middle.
Yeah,
that could just be showing the statistic or throwing the whole statistic range off because that is a big chunk of users. But it's too freaking complicated. And it's too easy to mess up. It's easy enough to mess up DNS without SEC. It works, but it's not well. It's not well written. It's not well understood. And like you've said multiple times throughout this podcast, like you're in a regular real world MSP and you're like, fuck no.
Yeah, no, there's no fucking way we're going to implement this. This is the problem with implementing this is getting even into the chain, like getting into the chain and having keys and making sure that I rotate my keys appropriately is such a pain in the dick. Like this is so much more work than I have. And DNS just works for me right now. Like that's it. Like that's the thing. So, in a real world environment, we combat this in the other way. We use help we use other protocols to help combat this and secure against this kind of attack that this would secure. And we do this several different ways with certification or with certificates and HTTP configuration, malware, anti-malware, that sort of thing. We can create a lot of different layers of protection with this. The reason why this is a good idea is from what I understand is that this is a proactive defense structure. So if you can trust the people above you, the people below will be good. The only problem is that we've had circumstances where these guys are where we've had circumstances where the trusted source, the trusted root actually gets compromised. We've had that in the past. Now, I don't know if that's happened with DNSSEC specifically, but with like actual DNS name resolution, we've actually had top level domains and registrars get compromised and issue bunk naming schemes and bunk certificates, actually, in fact. So no implementation is perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, this seems like a gigantic pain in the ass just to implement.
Yeah, I didn't, in my research, I didn't see anything that was said that DNSSEC had been compromised actively, because it's so active, so it's still inactively compromised by people just not fully implementing it, or half-assing it, or forgetting to rotate when they're supposed to rotate, or like going to the configuration page and filling it in but not hitting save. That kind of human error is the biggest compromise for DNSSEC, because it's complicated and it needs constant care and feeding.
Yeah.
So I didn't see anything that was like, I know what you're talking about. Like DNS servers have absolutely been compromised at the server themselves or their inputs. And like, yeah, that's not good. As far as I know, the actual keys that went up and down haven't been like that. That it's just math and it's worked, but it's too little too late. Like you made up DNS in 1987, and sometime in the mid 90s, they're like, oh shit, this internet thing it's not a fad. And everyone started scrambling. All the foundations started scrambling to like figure out how to secure all these basic protocols. And they just didn't get their shit together in enough time. And
so, what are other solutions for DNSSEC? Alternatives, I should say, that we're trying to implement. Are there any that are coming up? Folks,
so I think there is one that we're going to talk about for sure, but you mentioned something that I think is important. Like there's a suite of other things you do, and that every good security practitioner does to try and secure them. Like if you, dear 12 listeners, haven't heard before the Swiss cheese analogy, one piece of Swiss cheese doesn't stop shit because there's so many holes. You just wander right on through and attack the other cheese. I don't know. But if you layer a whole bunch of Swiss cheeses over each other, then ideally you cover all the holes. Something will stop whatever that attack is. Ideally, multiple things will stop it, but at least something will stop it. And we'll trust as few people as possible. Yeah. And validate all the time. Oh my God, trust but certify. That's what professionals do.
Yeah.
Or trust but validate. Sorry, not certify. So one thing that's been pushing is like DNS over HTTPS or DOE.
Let's see how many Simpsons references I can fit inside here instead of Game of Thrones references. That's what this episode's about.
Yeah, let's stay on topic or not. So, if you heard me earlier say that DNS and DNSSEC focuses on the I and the A of the CIA triad. DOH, I don't say it nearly as well as you. You just have a flair for it. So DOH it focuses on the confidentiality by using that secure part of HTTP to make it so that the DNS traffic is actually confidential and encrypts it and sends it back and forth. So that's great. It gives you the C on top of the IA, but on top of the A, it doesn't necessarily deal with I. So like DOH and DNSSEC are both trying to get you there and trying to give you more security than what just basic domain name service does with the, I'm going to help everybody do everything and I'm going to do it as publicly and quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that is coming up that's a competitor kind of for DNSSEC. Doesn't quite do the same thing, but does a lot of the same end state.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I was planning on talking about. I know you, again, you work at an MSP and you are working in this daily. What other tools have you seen?
So, when you talk about DNS and you're really talking about that, making sure that you are talking who you actually are talking to, and that you're being directed to the proper organization. There's a lot of different steps that you have in place. There's a lot of different requests, and on one side you implement you issue certificates to websites to identify who they are. And so the TLS and SSL structure for the internet is kind of key there. HTTPS, all of that. It's kind of ensures that you know who you're talking to. Like that makes sure that I know that this website is who I need to be. Of course, if somebody gets in the middle, again, man in the middle attack, there are always going to be areas where that becomes a problem. Now, beyond that, one of the other things that we can implement are things like cross-site forgery request protections, and you create session-based submission and resubmission techniques, so that way you make sure that data isn't manipulated or captured between you and your destination. So you handle this sort of on the back end. DNSSEC protects this on the front end, where you're making sure that the internet basically is helping protect you, but on a more direct and more session based, like instantiated methodology, you can implement a lot of these other protection methodologies, so that way you're protected. And really the idea here is that when you are running through the vast majority of your protection suite and trying to do defense in depth, what you're trying to do is you're really just trying to make sure, like you said, you're trying to make that Swiss cheese cover as many fucking holes as possible. And if you don't provide protections in both ways, you can leave yourself open to a bunch of holes. Which, if you don't have a Maester that has a full fucking chain, you're not going to get all of the benefits. Like if you don't have a Maester that has a gold ring on his chain, you've got a Maester who can't help you do your taxes, bro.
Yeah.
So yeah,
all the surfing tips they can give.
Yeah, right.
Polka dotted link.
Is it a polka dot link? I don't know.
For surfing, for sure.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, I totally derailed you. No, you're 100% right. And I like your analogy about like the upfront security from DNS, like initial, I'm making my first connection, and DNSSEC is it is more secure, but only slightly more useful in reality than just DNS to get to the front door. And that's really low down on the OSI model. And you, like what I heard you say is like, sure, we trust DNS as quickly, but we want as quick and smooth and functional just to get us to that front door. But then we go higher up the stack to validate a couple of different layers higher up in the stack, where we can actually iterate faster and change out tech and do that whole arms and armor race. Like, well, I have a better arrow. Well, I have a better shield plate. Well, I have a better arrow. And I have a better... That iteration happens faster higher up the stack in the application levels and the session levels, rather than DNS, which operates really low and very foundational, and it takes for freaking ever to upgrade the hardware and the backside. Sorry, they're just like, well, like what you were saying. To me, I hope that made sense. We're like, it's slower to iterate and secure that front side DNS stuff because it's so dumb and so foundational and so spread out, as opposed to higher up applications where it's a software update and it's real rapid and you can iterate fast. But having the multiple layers really makes sense. I might be rambling.
No, it makes total sense. No, and you're right. You can implement changes faster higher up on, or with the higher levels of the OSI model. Changing your application is much easier than changing, I don't know, the wires of the internet. Think of it that way. You're changing the wires of the internet. Yeah, it's going to take. It took my ISP 6 fucking years to put fiber in the street, and that's just my neighborhood, which just got made. So it's like this whole fucking thing where it's very complicated. It's very difficult to implement change lower down on the model, and as DNS being a core part of that, we need to be able to trust DNS at a core level. But there are ways to implement it, and then there are ways that don't provide us with the capacity to adjust appropriately. And so adjusting DNS entirely, probably not going to be great. It's just like IPv6 was introduced in 97? Mm-hmm. And it's still not widely accepted. And for those of you who are insane and implemented IPv6 for your local internet or local network, I salute you, but I think you're fucking crazy because IPv4 is perfect for local network and IPv6 is what the internet should be. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't see IPv4 going away because humans can understand that way better than can understand 6.
And Pareto tunneling is a fucking thing.
Yeah, it's not at all a problem. That is critical. That once we finally upgrade enough hardware to handle 6 out there, yeah. So, do you need more IP addresses than there are? Atoms on the planet, and not my brother-in-law Adam. I mean the actual atomic structure of our world. So many IP addresses in 6. It's like, yeah, sure. You get an address. You get an address. You get an address.
My address.
Yeah, all the hairs on my cat have an address. Okay. I did also just, sorry, Matthew, I did just see, there are 4 record types that I wanted to say specifically that are required for DNSSEC. The DNS key, which is the set of public keys. The RR-SIG, which is the signature key. That record type is really crucial. DS is the chain of trusted links. And that's a key one. And then the NSEC and the NSEC 3. So NSEC and NSEC 3 is actually, I think you find this interesting. NSEC was initial. It was the proof of non-existence. And it was like, yeah, no, that domain doesn't exist. But when NSEC came out, people were using it to enumerate the entire domain because you would kick off and be like, hey, I want the record, the DNS, I want to validate that this is a real domain, Matthew.Matthew. And it'd be like, cool. Well, Matthew.Matthew has, VPN.Matthew.Matthew, and it has mediashare.Matthew.Matthew, and then it doesn't have these. And it would go through every single possibility until it kicks back to Matthew.Matthew, back to the top level. And so you could enumerate an entire domain by walking the NSEC. And people were like, well, that's bad.
That's problematic. Oh my God, that's problematic. Holy shit. For those of you who don't know, penetration testing, part of penetration testing is finding subdomains within a domain that are reachable. And those are hidden for a reason. They're obfuscated for a fucking reason. And so if you had the ability to just enumerate an entire domain by itself, oh my fucking God. So that's problematic.
That was the first tweak to the DNSSEC group. And that's when they came up with NSEC 3. 2 was a bad idea. It was a bad party hat. So they went straight to 3. But that meant that it just said, no, the thing you're looking for doesn't exist, and I'm not telling you anything. And that's better. It didn't auto enumerate for you, which was it's actually entertaining. It was alluded to in the initial suite of RFCs as like, oh, NSEC will let you find out what is valid and what isn't valid in the domain.
Oh my God.
I could see totally. I mean, that's one thing I do like about RFCs and looking at IT in general is you can see like, okay, cool. We're going to do this thing and these are the things we think it's going to do. And then like 5 years later, when you find out the hackers have been using it to do this thing, you're like, oh shit. No, I totally saw it. I just didn't see how they would actually use it. So I did forget to say there's 4 record types. Those are the 4 most important record types for DNSSEC, and those are probably crucial to throw out there academically. But anyway, that's I think all I have for DNSSEC. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more. I don't know, Matt, did you feel more informed?
I feel very confused, slightly horny, and just a wee bit like I gotta pee. But that's just any time I talk about Maesters in general and Game of Thrones. It's just that's how it works, bro. That's how it works.
You have to pee. Wow. I see.
Yeah. Well, you
gotta go Game of Thrones thing, man. Like you're throwing out shit. I'm like, I think I read those books, but holy shit, where are all these details coming from?
Well, for those of us who are nerdy and really dive really deep into it, this is entertaining for us. The whole like 5 of us that totally called the end of the book from book 1, or the end of the books from book 1. Of course, the end of the books was that George R. R. Martin dies before the end, but that's a story for another time.
When Brandon Sanderson finishes all Game of Thrones.
Oh God, I hope not. Holy shit. Maybe Joe Abercrombie, the biggest name in sci-fi.
God.
Yeah, that's that. I think that about covers it. You got any finishing remarks? Anything you want to say before we go?
Other than maybe doing this at 5 a.m. wasn't the best answer for an academic attempt, but I think we could. Looking at my notes, I think I got everything. Obviously, this is a really detailed thing. Charts would very much help if this sounds confusing. It is for people who study it. It is for people who practice it with it. Having the visuals up is good. Having RFCs is always good. Control F those things. Don't read them. Oh my God. Obviously I did because I did my research correctly, but it generally just Control F. But yeah, it would help. Unfortunately, podcasts don't really help with graphics, but I also just
audio only medium. Damn it!
Hey Matthew, can I shoot you my list of URLs, my research stuff with the episode in case people want to dig into it a little bit more? Okay.
We'll put those in the show. We'll post those in the show notes.
That'd be fantastic. Otherwise, thank you again for letting me talk about Maesters for a little bit, and then something else.
Yeah, and of course, if you guys want to investigate DNSSEC, and if you're pedantic and want to argue about it, well, I don't really have a place for you to go and talk to anybody, so you'll have to shout at the clouds. But otherwise, if you want to investigate more on your own, I definitely suggest it. Understanding DNSSEC is kind of integral to the growth of the internet, and it'll help you understand why things are the way they are. But other than that, guys, that's all we have time for today. And I hope you all have a great day.